Did you know that there is a city in China that built 40,000 apartments, yet remains practically empty? And that a design flaw led to the US wasting $5 billion building the country's largest airport. Today we take a closer look at 5 of the most useless megaprojects in the world. Now before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Megacities. Share your thoughts about these megaprojects in the comments down below. We start things off with number 5, Denver International Airport. In the late 1980s, Denver was going through a population explosion, and the existing Stapleton International Airport was reaching capacity. With being an older airport, it was plagued by flight delays and was unable to expand. That is when it was decided to build the larger Denver International Airport to accommodate the increased demand. In 1990, construction on the Denver International Airport started. Designed to be the nation's largest airport and the second largest airport in the world, covering 136 square kilometers, the equivalent size of 1.5 times the area of Manhattan, New York. It was designed with 53 kilometers of runway and would have the 7th longest runway in the world. During construction, multiple delays were encountered, but none were as big as the automated baggage handling system. At the request of United Airlines, the airport designers included building the most advanced automated baggage system in history. And this is where it goes bad. First, the system was more complicated than any other baggage system ever built, and there was no company that was able to build such an automated system. However, that didn't stop the engineers from trying. Where it got even worse was in April of 1994. The airport planned a demonstration with reporters of the world's most advanced baggage handling system ever constructed. When the system started operating, it began tossing baggage over the edges of the conveyor belts, crushing and chewing up luggage, and scattering clothes in all directions. So turning out to be a complete failure and public humiliation for the airport officials. After this big public failure, the system was taken offline and it was decided to repair it once the airport was open. Eventually, after 5 years of construction and 16 months of delays, the airport opened in October 1994. All said and done, it cost a shocking $4.8 billion, almost 250% more than its original budget. Since the airport's opening, the automated baggage system continued to be a $600 million maintenance hassle and was finally terminated in September of 2005. Number 4. Hambantota Port, Sri Lanka. In 2008, the Sri Lankan government began construction on the Hambantota Port, located on the southeastern coast of Sri Lanka. The idea behind the project was to build a major shipping hub for the Indian Ocean and increase trade and revenue for the country. The port was designed to handle over 30,000 ships and 5,000 oil tankers annually. The cost of the project was estimated at $1.5 billion and was expected to be completed by 2010. However, from the start, the construction was plagued with challenges. The location of the port was in a remote and underdeveloped part of the country, making it difficult to transport building materials and workers to the site. Additionally, environmental groups raised concerns about the potential damage to the area's rich ecosystem. These ongoing challenges caused significant delays and cost overruns, and the project was finally completed in 2013 at a cost of $1.12 billion. Despite the government's optimism, the first year of the port's operation was a major disappointment. The government had expected the port to be a bustling hub, but instead only 34 ships docked there in its first year. Due to the remote location and the lack of infrastructure to support shipping operations, the port was not favored. To add to these issues, the port was simply too far from the major shipping lanes to be a viable option for many ships. Despite the initial setback, the government continued to invest in the port, hoping to turn it into a major economic hub. However, the port remained largely unused, and the government was unable to repay the loans it had taken out to fund the project. In 2017, the government made a controversial decision to lease the port to a Chinese company for 99 years in exchange for some debt relief. Now, despite the significant investment, the port remains unused and is still a useless megaproject to this day. Number 3, Zwentendorf Nuclear Power Plant, Austria. Now, there are nations that have had many nuclear power plants, but Austria has just one. But even then, the nation doesn't even use it. So why would a country spend so much money on a mega project like this only to abandon it? Well, sit back because we're going to tell you all about it. This nuclear power plant is called the Zwentendorf Nuclear Power Plant and is located on the Danube River bank, which is about 20 miles northwest of Vienna. So when the nation saw it needed additional power for its citizens, the Austrian government made a plan to build 3 nuclear power plants to fulfill power demands. In this case, the Zwentendorf plant was the first of the 3 nuclear power plants that was approved to be built, and this happened in the late 1960s. The plan was expected to deliver over 700 megawatts of energy, which was roughly 1/10 of Austria's electricity needs. Construction began only in 1972 and it was finished, filled with fuel, and ready to start in 1978. But then suddenly, the nation decided that it did not need nuclear energy anymore. Given that this project cost over $1 billion and was ready for use, it was clearly designed to be abandoned. What a waste, right? However, there were other cons that were associated with this project which could have led experts to think that it wouldn't be a wise decision to use it. It is said that Zwentendorf was built to cool the steam with water from the Danube River, but there was one thing it did not have: typical cooling towers. Now you might be thinking, well, someone should have overlooked this project, but let's be clear. There was actually enough security and importance given to this nuclear power plant when it was being constructed, but there was no doubt that the project had security design flaws. The lack of an emergency backup power source posed a threat to the infrastructure since it was built near a river, which could have put the power plant at risk of flooding. Additionally, the plant also suffered damage at the beginning of its construction. A powerful earthquake struck the region just 2 weeks after the ground was broken, causing foundation damage to the power plant. Then, during a flood on the Danube, water seeped into its containment vessel, indicating that there was in fact leaks. Also, on November 5, 1978, there was a vote in which over 1.6 million Austrians took part. The purpose of the vote was to determine the fate of the power plant. After the vote was made, they found that over 50.5% of voters cast their ballots in favor of the nuclear power plant and the rest against. However, regardless of the small margin of victory, the power plant's fate was sealed. Even though it was ready to use, it was just kept in good working order for the next 7 years until 1985. The next year, in 1986, the nuclear accident at Chernobyl ended any hope of operating the plant again. The government began partially dismantling the power plant shortly after this incident. Although some parts were sold to German nuclear companies, the facility as a whole is still in excellent condition. The plant's current owner uses the complex as a security training facility and rents it to event planners and movie producers to use as a set for films. Number 2, Montenegro Highway. What is considered to be the first highway in Montenegro is currently dubbed the Highway to Hell. Well, why? Why would such a promising mega project just go to waste? Well, this is what happened. Montenegro is a country located in the west-central Balkans at the southern end of the Dinaric Alps. It is bounded by the Adriatic Sea and Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Kosovo, and Albania. Though there is road connectivity between these close landmarks, it is a little difficult to reach other areas that are further than the urbanized areas. This was also one of the reasons why Montenegro's government decided to build this mega project, a highway that would connect the entire nation. The project would include 90 tunnels and 40 bridges. A plan was proposed stating that the highway would have a 100-mile expressway that would run from the Adriatic coast port city of Bar to Serbia's border. This route would also make Montenegro, which has 600,000 people, a transportation hub for the Balkans and boost economic activity in the country's impoverished north. However, the nation didn't have the capital, so they did what the Sri Lankans did. They took a loan from the Chinese government and the project's construction started. However, there was a twist. China stated that they wanted their construction companies to initiate the project. Montenegro had to oblige. So the highway now only has 40 of the planned 170 kilometers. Also, there was a huge loan scandal that took place at the time of construction. It turns out the amount they asked for wasn't enough, so parts of the highway still lay untouched. Additionally, the project experienced many obstacles while construction, such as an environmental catastrophe, construction delays, and allegations of corruption. Also, the idea of creating roads through the unpopulated backwoods is impossible because of the lack of resources. But even then, why did the government decide to go ahead with it despite all of these red flags? Well, even when the experts told the government that it wouldn't be possible, no one took heed. They even cautioned that the cost would always outweigh the advantages for Adriatic tourism and business, as well as for development in less developed northern regions. But even then, no one listened. Now, the current president and former prime minister of Montenegro, Milo Đukanović, is in charge of the country. He was the one who came up with the idea for the highway to boost trade in the tiny Balkan nation. However, he shouldn't have done one thing: taken a $1 billion loan from China. Just look at what happened to the port in Sri Lanka that we talked about earlier. Even the IMF and the European Investment Bank declared that it was a bad idea. Though the president did inquire about investors, they weren't willing to participate. Prior to this, the risks associated with such a large project were highlighted in French and American feasibility studies. And now, the country is having trouble finding a way to pay for the missing road sections. And last on our list of the world's most useless megaprojects, number 1, Ordos Ghost City, China. For years, this Inner Mongolian city has been all but deserted, but after the right to mine deposits was granted to mining companies, the city was created. When the large mining companies then started to begin operations, the city prospered, and later by the early 2000s, the city wanted to make this into an urbanized development. Farmers living in nearby areas also were induced to sell their land as they were offered to stay in this area. As a result, Ordos became the Chinese city with the second highest income per resident. But due to water shortage problems, the Chinese government chose to completely rebuild New Ordos rather than attempt to upgrade the city's existing infrastructure. An estimated $1 billion in infrastructure was invested in the city's construction, which began in 2005. However, no one has lived in this city for even the first 5 years since it was finished. According to many locals, a working couple only makes $800 monthly combined, of which $130 goes towards rent. The cost of new apartments in New Ordos range from $70,000 to $100,000, making it nearly impossible for locals to reside there. Sales started out slowly, but eventually investors started buying up a large number of the new city's apartments. As a result, New Ordos now has an enormous amount of infrastructure, but no inhabitants. The city was originally designed to hold 1 million people, but will scale down during construction to 500,000 and then to 300,000 after coal prices crash. The city has a 5-story shopping center as well as striking monuments, statues, art, and city museums. The Opera House, a brand new airport, a contemporary mosque, and the Ordos Dongshan Stadium, which has 35,000 seats. Only 2% of the buildings were ever occupied. The majority were left empty outside the mall, and elaborate water shows were performed every night to sparse crowds. So what do you think of these useless mega projects? And do you know of any other projects that might have gone even worse? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, if you want to see more about similar useless mega projects, watch one of these videos right here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.